So much of my career in science has been about the discovery of meaning in science. And it was a big crisis for me as a scientist to realize how little of science dealt with meaning. I didn't understand this, but over the years I've understood finally that so much of it is about getting knowledge for control of the natural world. And so the question of meaning sort of dropped out of the scientific enterprise. And my work is focused on bringing back into the world of science questions of ultimate meaning. You know, like even what's the role of the human? Even to ask that question, you're thrown back into a really ancient inquiry. Yeah, well, I can indeed. You know, our story begins, our human story begins 4 million years ago, in this incredible moment when our ancestors stood up. So I mean, it's just, that is the major moment for the humans. And then, so that was in Africa. And then the next great moment after that is 2.5 million years ago, when we began to use tools. So I mean, you have to get the point that this is a creature in the African forest suddenly starting to use tools. And then 1.5 million years ago, we began to use fire. And because we could use fire, we could move out from Africa. See, every species stays within its own biome. And if it migrates, it goes to another biome in which it can exist. But with fire, we could break out of our biome. And so we went on this long journey up into Eurasia, and we were lost in a certain sense because we were no longer part of our homeland in Africa. But thrown out into this journey, we evolved. And so we became what we call Homo erectus. And then the great moment after that, after breaking out of Africa, the big moment is the development of culture and language. This takes place possibly beginning 300,000 years ago. But then the explosion around 40,000 years ago when Homo sapiens sapiens went all around the planet. So we were roaming, we're moving all the time from 40,000 years ago. The Neolithic is the most crucial social invention in the history of the human because it is the moment when the humans that moved, you know, the hunters, the gatherers, when they finally settled down. Finally, see, even to say that, there's no reason to say finally because they could have kept moving like they had for all these millennia, millions of years. The Neolithic is a time when humans established a new way of occupying a space in a permanent settle. That's the way we would look at it. It's a permanent settlement of the human. And this is it's the birth really of civilization and of a settled human culture. Because of this interaction with the life systems, there was an explosion of life energy in the form of food, which enabled humans to begin to attend to some of their potentials that they didn't attend to in the past. So you have, rather than every human doing all of the same work, there would be a ability to focus on certain tasks and certain activities that would be unique and new. So we have a flourishing of the arts and a deepening understanding of the nature of the universe. So I see a civilization then as a place where some of the human potentiality that couldn't yet be expressed began to flow forth in a settled place and a deepening ability to interact successfully with the larger life systems. In complexity science, one of the crucial ideas is called synergy. There's the notion that it is in the interaction of disparate parts that a larger coherence arises. And so it's the way in which intelligence appears. So the profound attunement of the people in the Neolithic to the movement of the seasons, to the movement of the animals and the grasses, enabled a new appearance of intelligence. So the human is entering into a natural community, but entering in a deep way that enables that whole community to flourish in a new order of coherence and intelligence. So from the point of view of system sciences, complexity science, the reason the Neolithic peoples had this ability to fashion human life in a way that is what we all want. It's a time of abundance and gentleness without that warfare. The reason they're able to do this is because of the synergistic effects of the male and female humans working together, as well as the humans working with the larger patternings of the ecosystems in which they lived. In our tradition, we're taught that that nature is like a machine, or that it's dead. It's just inert matter, and we can just move it around and make any kind of commodities we want. Well, if we start off with that attitude, then it's hard to actually see why you'd want to enter into a deeper relationship with nature. But that's why, at least from the point of view of science, I'm excited by the insights that are coming out of complexity science and the whole evolutionary sciences, because we see that we're not sort of placed here in a dead universe. It was actually the universe that gave birth to us. The Earth, I mean, at one time, this is an amazing fact we've learned. The Earth at one time was all molten rocks. It was all molten. It was all lava, the whole Earth. And now suddenly, here we are. We're here, the flowers are here, you know, the rainbows are here. So that, my point is that there is a profound creative power that is expressed by the land, you know, and by the seas. And so that rather than being here to control that, a new idea begins to enter into our scientifically trained minds, and that is maybe our quest is to enter more deeply into relationship with this magnificence all around us. And that would be to begin to participate in the seasons and in the life world in a way that has an echo with the world that Marija was studying. So it would be a Charlene Spretnak's, you know, phrase, her great phrase, resurgence of the real. So it'd be a resurgence within, say, Western science of a desire to commune with a larger intelligence in a deeper value. So I see this surfacing in science. I see it as a real sign of hope. It's not the only place, obviously, by any means, but it's different now. We realize now that the birth of the universe 13 billion years ago is so delicate and such an elegant event that if it were even slightly different, the universe would not be like this now. Even if you altered even any one of the interactions of the fundamental flaring forth 13 billion years ago, the universe would just be dust. So, I mean, we didn't know this. We scientists didn't know this at all. So now we're discovering that the universe in some sense was from the beginning about giving birth to life, intelligence, beauty. So rather than trying to control all of this, what about celebrating all of this? So I see a fundamental shift taking place in science. And so my hope is that will be part of this major move out of the discontinuity that you're talking about. It took me 10 years to get over my Western civilizational knee-jerk reaction. 10 years. And I at first I thought, this is all fantasy. I could not imagine a time that was free from war. It was just beyond me. It was beyond my mind. And over 10 years, and especially being in conversation with people like Charlene Spretnak, who would, every objection I had, they would you know, bring up another perspective. But it took that long for me to deconstruct that tiny Western scientific mindset that saw us here to control the universe, that couldn't imagine things were ever different than the world I saw around me. So it was not an easy experience. I imagine it depends a lot on the person. Maybe many people would hear this and just immediately they'd read Marija and they go, that's exactly what had to be true. But for me, it wasn't that way. I had to go through it's a deep conversion experience. when ideas that I took as foundational turned out to be, flimsy upper stories, and there's a foundation beneath that, and a foundation beneath that, and a foundation beneath that. So it was, I think my response was a typical white male response. And that's encouraging, okay? My hope is that if it took me 10 years, all right, maybe my sons will take them 9, I don't know. But I think it also is, it gives a sense of hope that even though many people today reject Marija's work, because I've talked to anthropologists from many different universities, and they remind me of my first response. No, it couldn't be true. No, it couldn't be true. But after a lot of denial, and I began to carefully consider what she had written and examine her works more carefully, and it was like a deeply religious experience. To be swept out of one world and to be drawn into a much vaster and deeper sense of the universe. I think the essential knowledge that she has brought forth and created will hold up. I think a lot of it will be improved upon, and she would hate it for otherwise. I think she has initiated a field of scholarship in a way of examining our own story that will find its true fulfillment in the 21st century, not the 20th. I think her ultimate impact is ahead of us. Okay, I'll tell you. Okay. I think intuition is the way in which a human makes contact with the fact that we are the universe reflecting upon itself. I'll say it again. I mean, the universe, it took 13 billion years for the universe to give birth to the human. All of those powers that were involved in giving birth to the human are now in the form of the human. So intuition is the way in which the universe develops deep self-knowledge. My example here is Albert Einstein. Einstein, in fact, after his amazing career, the most celebrated scientist of the 20th century, he said, basically, it's about imagination. What she's talking about is intuition. And so, one story about Einstein. He invented the fundamental theory of cosmology that we use today. So he gave birth to what are called the field equations. In other words, he wrote down the equations that tell us how the universe organizes itself. But he had no data about the large-scale universe. That came later, after him. So people are asking him, how did you get this information? Well, imagination, intuition. It was through profound reflection at the bodily level. He even used the word musculature. So when he would think, he was in touch with those very dynamics that gave birth to the universe. That's how he could actually express them. So he was the universe writing its own signature through the power of intuition. And they spoke directly to her. She reminds me of Barbara McClintock. I mean, Barbara McClintock, a Nobel Prize in biology, and her way of doing science was a combination of analysis, which we know very much about, and intuition. And she would, reflecting upon the chromosomes of corn, she would actually commune with them. I mean, this is intuition. And they would speak directly to her. She called them her friends. Now, most people would see this as just ridiculous in science, but she won the Nobel Prize, so we have to pay attention. I think that's the way in which research will be done in the future. Not exclusively, but always in rapport with more traditional analytical methods. Okay, so one way to talk about intuition and Marija's use of it is to use the ideas of this great physicist, David Bohm. And his fundamental study was quantum, the quantum world. And this is one of the most alarming discoveries of the 20th century, is that the particles at a quantum level emerge out of the vacuum, and then they disappear back into the vacuum, so that even though things seem stable, they're fluctuating, they're vibrating. And we say quantum vacuum, but other cultures would use different words. So the Buddhists would talk about shunyata, and the Godhead, but for us it's the quantum vacuum. But David Bohm's understanding is that the entire past of the universe is held by the quantum vacuum. It's all there in this mysterious realm, and it surfaces in different moments. So, for instance, our memories are arising out of what he called the implicate order. So his understanding of Marija would be that as she is handling these figurines and thinking about them and imagining and touching them, she is in that moment evoking the actual moments when they were shaped and when they were lived with in the Neolithic settlements. So that her knowledge would be a direct experience of that life then, according to David Bohm's thinking about memory and imagination.
To me, I
well,
didn't
exactly.
have that thought.
Right.
You did have the thought. So
you did have the thought.
Yeah.
And when people would ask Einstein, well, how'd you do all of this? And he got frustrated because they didn't get the point. And so he finally just said, look, imagination's more important than knowledge. He was trying to really get it across to him. It's like direct, intuitive awareness.
So it's not enough to just have that. You also have to have you have to pay your dues.
You have to pay your dues. That's right. Exactly. Right.
And
That's the long, hard work of scholarship. That's right. And then even here, David Bohm has an interesting idea. The hard work of scholarship is part of creating the form of mind, like a crystal. It's like constellating the mind so that when the past emerges, it can be felt. Sure, because that doesn't fit into the methodologies. That's always the word I get when they're criticizing Marija. The methodologies that lead to real knowledge. Hey, there's one good story that about Barbara McClintock.
Yeah.
In terms of this.
Yes.
This is a good story.
Okay, say this.
Barbara McClintock, worked intuitively and analytically, and so she had this deep rapport at a very, very deep level with living things, including maize. That was her study. When she first presented her results to a scientific audience, there was stunned silence when she was done. It was just beyond what they could handle. It was stunned silence, no response. 40 years later, they gave her the Nobel Prize for that work. It took the whole scientific world of biology 40 years to catch up to where she was. Well, let's hope it'll take less than 40 years to catch up to Marija. Because see, so much of the scholarship is creating this little small box, and so right, the intuitive mind can get it right away, like, oh yeah, right. Like one time I was talking to kids in grade school about how our bodies are actually made out of molecules that were constructed by stars. I mean, I'm so thrilled by this, right? We discovered this. It's so great. And this one little kid said, I know that.
Start off, Mom.